Rob. Well, it is. Oh, what day is it, Rob? Thursday.
Thursday.
And we are here to celebrate with you the missing hour. So, Robert Rutherford, I'll try that again, shall I? Robert Rutherford, welcome.
Thank you. Hello.
Show us this lovely cover and tell us a bit about the book.
So this is it. I have to block myself off there. Missing Hour came out last month. And some of you might know me as in my actual legal name. I used to write under Robert Scragg, which is my birth name, and I've now switched over to Robert Rutherford. Different type of crime book, different type of thriller. So this is Rutherford book number 2, and it is the story of Maggie Brewer, who, and there's no spoilers really because this is in the blurb. Her husband is accused of murder. The police have everything they say they need to have him banged to rights. They have CCTV, they have DNA, which, you watch enough crime dramas, DNA is never wrong. But Maggie's the only person who believes that he couldn't possibly have done this because he was with her all night long. But the one secret that she hasn't told anyone, including the police as well, is that he was with her all night long, except for one missing hour. And that's I guess the crux that the book hinges on is what is she hiding in that missing hour? What is he hiding? And what could possibly have happened in that 60 minutes that sends her world off in a bit of a tailspin?
I mean, this book kicks off in grand style with something absolutely terrifying happening. And how long ago is it since you've looked back at this? I'm worried about asking questions that you can't answer because it was so long ago.
Do you know what? Actually, you could probably have a good stab at asking anything because for the first time ever, I've listened to the full audio of this book, and I only finished it like 2 weeks ago, mainly because I was interested to see how the narrator did with the Northeast accents. And she did a good job, actually, just to give her a shout out. So I've listened to the whole thing, even though I wrote it, gosh, it would have been... started right in 2020. Actually.
Wow.
It was 2020. I was unagented at the time. I was in between agents. And this was the book that got me my second and current agent. So, best part of 5 years since I started it, which is a bit crazy, really, bearing in mind it's just come out.
This wasn't the first book it was technically the first book with your new agent, as I found out as I've read through. But you've believed in this book for much longer.
Yeah, so, I talked about this a bit in the acknowledgements as well. It's very much I think the book and me are kind of a bit of a story of second chances, because as I mentioned there, I used to write under my actual name, Robert Scragg. I had a different agent, which, that in itself was a long slog to get that agent. And we parted ways after 3 books. They went to focus on kids' books. So I was left there unagented, back where I started, feeling a bit dejected. And I tried to pivot a little bit, I guess, in terms of what I write. So the first books were all more traditional police procedural ones, whereas these are more high concept thrillers. And I thought I need to do something a little bit different to stand out again, really. So started with The Missing Hour. And actually, I pitched it to the agency that I'm with before I'd even finished it. There was a Twitter pitch at the time. I still can't bring myself to call it X. And I had to do a Twitter pitch of, 144 characters. And then if you got a like from one of the agents, you then got a 10-minute Zoom. And then if they liked what they heard there, they'd ask to read the full thing. So, but then bizarrely, I didn't actually pitch to the agent I'm now with. I pitched to one of his colleagues because I'd been rejected by the agent I'm now with, which is David Headley at DHH, a number of times for previous books. So there's another second chance to add in, I guess, or fourth chance with David. So I'd actually pitched to Harry Illingworth at DHH, and Harry liked my tweet. We did the Zoom, liked the pitch that I gave him, and he said, "Oh, that sounds great. I'd love to read the full thing if you can send that over." Now, there was one problem. I'd only written about 25,000 words at that point. And then I didn't really kind of want to fess up to that because I thought, oh, God, how long is he going to wait? So I probably shouldn't be saying this on a live stream in case Harry watches, but I kind of told the little white lie. I told the little white lie and I said, oh, well, I've got a bit of polishing to do and I wouldn't ask you to be happy with it until I was happy with it. So can you give me like maybe 4, 5, 6 weeks? And I had a lot of late nights and drank a lot of coffee, and I got a first draft done. But even then, Harry liked it, but it was a little too close in theme to something one of his clients was already doing. So he said, "I hope you don't mind. I've passed it on to a colleague of mine, David, and David will be in touch." And that's kind of how I got in touch with David and how he ended up representing me. But you're right, this wasn't the first book that came out under Rutherford. That was this one, 7 Days, which came out last year, because the Missing Hour originally got the nicest rejections ever from everyone. I think we had like 14, 15 fabulous rejections telling me how much they loved it, but it just wasn't quite right for their list.
Which just proves that everything will find its place in its time.
100%. It's right time, right place, right person. And even the editor that I'm now with at Hodder, Phoebe, she'd actually read The Missing Hour when it was called something else at the time, and had lots of nice stuff to say about it, and just didn't have space for a book like that on her list at the time. And then obviously she's read it probably about 2.5 years afterwards, and it was a completely different decision then. She was a different publisher then as well, but different list, different decision, different time. So it literally is a second chance book for a second chance author.
Do you want to tell us a little bit about 7 Days, which I have now bought because I hadn't read it. And as soon as I finished The Missing Hour, first thing I did was buy 7 Days. So tell us about that. I haven't started it yet, so no spoilers.
Yeah, so 7 Days is that is the story of Alice, who is a 30-something-year-old lawyer. She lives in the northeast England, funnily enough, about 2 miles from my house, actually. And she used to live in the States when she was a kid because her dad is from America, and he was not a nice person. And essentially, the family was kind of fractured by the kind of person he was. She came back to the UK, and she's had nothing to do with him for 14 years. And the book opens with, and again, there's no spoilers because it's part of the blurb. The book opens with her finding out the reason she's not heard from him is he's been on death row for the last 11 of those 14 years. Wow. And hasn't wanted to burden his family with that. So she basically finds out he's on death row for murder, and her younger sister doesn't remember what a horrible human being the dad was, and wants to help and wants to see if they can get him a better lawyer, and can you even stop these things with 7 days to go? And Alice gets involved only to save her younger sister from heartache, or to try to anyway. She still has no time for her dad, and she gets drawn into a whole tangled mess purely out of being protective for a younger sister, really. And it spirals from Whitley Bay. You'd naturally twin with places like Paris and New York, obviously. So we kind of bounce from Whitley Bay to Paris to New York and then back to Whitley Bay again.
I love that. We'll get to the settings in The Missing Hour a bit later, but before we before we were live, we were talking, and I was saying that the main character, Maggie, absolutely love her. Really felt like I got to know her. Somebody that she's courageous even when she's terrified, because you do put her through the ringer in the book. But the bit I wanted to focus on first was the fact that she's named after your mum, which is lovely.
Yeah.
So talk to us about the character names in the books.
So it's not just my mum, as I said before before we went live. A couple of the main characters are all named after. I stress named after, not all based on characteristics of, but named after my mum. So Maggie, the main character, is my mum. One of the secondary characters, Davy, is named after my uncle David. And then you've got the rest of the family, my uncle Freddie, Auntie Julie, and Auntie Moira, and even my nana as well. So it kind of felt like a nice tribute at the time, and even more poignant, I guess. I was just chatting with the team at Hodder this week because we sadly lost my uncle David a couple of weeks ago. So I'm going to change the dedication for the paperback when that comes out to dedicate that to him. But it's one of those things. It's fun. It was fun to do. We kind of joked before he got really poorly about who we'd want to play him in the movie and all that kind of stuff. So I said I would try for Brad Pitt, but I couldn't promise anything. I try and steer clear of basing a character on every last fibre of someone's personality. because I think you open yourself up a little bit then to them saying, well, I would never do that. I wouldn't say that. But yeah, it was just a nice little tribute, I guess, really. I've done that in a couple of other instances as well. So the book I'm writing at the moment has got some people in that are close to me as well. And another one from The Missing Hour, actually, the young IT genius, Leighton, let's give me his full name, is named after my godson.
Oh, I love that. Now I have to ask, did you name the characters first and then write them, or did you give the characters to the names once you'd written them?
I decided pretty much when I was planning it out, really. So before I'd even written the intro, that I was going to use my mum and her brothers and sisters, and then Leighton came as a bit of an afterthought. And yeah, so it was the names were there right from the start, really. To be honest, there was one could have been an awkward moment, which when we were doing the edits with the team at Hodder, and they'd made a point about the two sisters, obviously named after my two aunties, and they'd said, well, the two sisters, they always appear together. They're all in the same scenes together. We're not sure they've got a distinctive enough voice to be two separate characters. Could you not just cut one of them out? And then obviously I had to explain the family politics that would trigger if I did a coin toss to cut one out. So yeah, obviously they both stayed in. It would have been more than my life was worth to cut one out and leave the other in.
Yeah, without some sort of weird combination of the names, I don't know how you could get away with that.
No.
And then
no,
each of them just be half a character while everybody else gets a whole one. Yeah, family dynamics, no.
Yeah.
We've got some hellos already, so hello everyone who's watching. Have you ever acted out a scene in public or private? Sarah Blackburn says. Now, Sarah, I don't know if you've read this book yet, but I don't know which scenes you'd want to be acting.
Not from this book. I have it so that one thing I always try and get right is that I try and make the action scenes as realistic as possible in terms of kind of how the action flows. And there's one fight scene in particular in 7 Days where I wanted to get the choreography right in my mind to make sure things worked. Now, as I mentioned before we came on camera before, I do a bit of martial arts myself, and I train with another crime writer, actually, Matt Veselovsky. And it was, probably about 3 years ago now when I was writing the scene in 7 Days. And I'm sat at the dining table tapping away, and I just couldn't quite picture it in my head. So I actually got my wife to stand up, and I got her to throw certain punches my way, nice and slow, obviously, just to literally to walk through that fight scene in slow motion in terms of, so if you throw this punch here, that's the block I would use, and I would do this and kind of piece it together blow by blow. So she kept a straight face through most of it as well, to be fair to her. But that was really, really helpful. But I don't think there's anything in The Missing Hour I've acted out. No, not that one. But yeah, 7 Days. I've done that once, and I would definitely do it again. Actually, if the need arose, it was mega helpful.
I think it's really good for getting the details right, like you said, checking that something could work. Because while everything doesn't have to be real, it does have to be realistic.
Yeah, definitely. Is there a scene you think I should have acted out, Sam? I know you said you've not long finished it.
I don't even know where you'd start. I mean, one of the questions I came up with before was to do with a vegetable peeler. Now, I don't know how you'd work through that scene.
You've now got people thinking, what the hell has he done?
It's one of those things, isn't it? That a vegetable peeler, you read it and it's kind of like as though it's so ridiculous that it can't possibly be scary. And then it is.
Well, I think sometimes and I don't know, do you think we should give the full context? That doesn't really spoil anything, does it?
I don't think it spoils anything.
No, it doesn't spoil. So there's a guy in The Missing Hour called everyone called him Mr. Clay. And he is not a nice chap at all. And he has a reputation for being he's a man who enjoys his work. He enjoys inflicting pain and discomfort on others. And he's very, very good at it. And his reputation kind of follows him round, doesn't it? And stories are enough, I think, to strike that terror into some people, and some of the stories that people recount from him. One of which is a scene where it's not a scene in the book, but it's referred to, and I think that sometimes makes it a little bit more
Terrifying.
terrifying when it's not all about kind of blood splashing all over the place. It's more just, I'll leave you to imagine it, about the one time that he ended up using a vegetable peeler on one of his victims, for want of a better phrase, to extract information. So I'll leave it up to you to decide how he did that, where he used it, and all of that kind of stuff. And I think sometimes you can, less is more.
Absolutely, like yeah. It was just one of those funny things that, yeah, funny versus terror. I know I'd rather be on the funny side.
I think it's a balance as well between, part of me thinks I don't want to make scenes too gory.
Yeah.
I know some people really like that, but then I think you risk putting off a big chunk of your readers if it's almost kind of bordering on like horror / horrific scenes. I've heard a few people commenting to that effect, so I try and have that balance between enough action that there's some genuine jeopardy in there, but stopping short of making it an all-out gore fest.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like there's not any kind of gore at all, but it is more implied than anything else, which, yeah, I think, letting the reader have an idea of their own terror, I think is a good place to start.
I got some editorial notes that suggested I kind of amped it up at a few places. Like don't know if you remember, there's a scene on a rooftop that overlooks the coast, and it was suggested that I made that a bit more visceral and a bit more kind of graphic. I did to a degree, toned down what I first almost turned that into, but yeah, to a degree. And it's a balance, isn't it? You can't keep everyone happy.
Of course. Right, one of the things that I loved, we are going to go to the first scene in a minute, because I think I said that about 20 minutes ago and we've just been moving on from there. But sibling conversations, there's a line, and I'm going to cut, you'll know which bit I'm cutting out of the line, and anyone who's read it will, but for everybody else they'll have to read it to find the full line. After pouring my heart out to you about this, and this is Maggie saying this to her brother David, after pouring my heart out to you about people, you couldn't even drop in like what a coincidence, me too. And it just made me really laugh at how they were talking to each other in this high pressure situation. Yeah. You know, neither of them know what's going on in each other's lives fully at that point. They've both kind of got an idea of things. I suppose Davey knows more at this point, but just that whole sibling thing the whole way through. There was a reel doing the rounds a while ago about how kids, how we think our kids talk to each other and then how they actually do. And my kids went to town with it, because there was one about people walking past each other on the stairs who'd maybe say hello, but siblings don't say hello to each other. They call each other a name, or, say something sarcastic or whatever it is they're doing. And for some reason, I seem to have completely gone off camera. I don't know if you can see me or not.
I can still see you, yeah.
That's fine then, as long as you can. But sibling relationships, they go a long way to increasing tension, adding humour, letting a bit of pressure off the characters where it's needed as well, because they've got that, that sibling bond. I love that. So how much of that has come from your life and watching people and how they interact with each other?
I think it's a bit of that, and also kind of influenced by a lot of the kind of books that I like to read as well. So I think there's a lot of really great crime that has a bit of dark humour kind of intertwined through it, and especially when it's people who are just ordinary everyday people. They're not trained police officers, they're not soldiers, they're not trained to deal with these kind of scenarios, and they almost fall back on humour like a bit of a coping mechanism. And in amongst all of the chaos and turmoil that Maggie finds herself in, I think it's that kind of safe space almost in the eye of the storm when she's with her brother, that she starts to kind of relax and take a breath, even though she's not out of danger, but she's relaxed enough around him to have that kind of, to fall back into the old way of kind of banter with him and to and fro and stuff. And it's, I think it's those little moments there that are kind of those human moments that can make a story hopefully stand out. Really, and for me, it's always been about character. I stick with a book because I love the characters, not just the story. If the characters aren't grabbing me, I'm more likely to not finish the book, or to draw it out over weeks or months or however long, because I'm not compelled to go back to it. Whereas if it's all about the characters, and they drag me back in every time. Like I'm reading a book at the minute that I literally I'm snatching a page here and a page there while I'm boiling the kettle, even because I'm 100% there for the characters.
I was reading The Missing Hour while I was drying my hair, got the laptop in front of me so I could keep reading. So, yeah, I know that feeling. Sarah wants to know if you're going to any book events this year.
I've got a couple coming up, actually, and it depends where people are based. So the next one actually is this Saturday. I'm in Whitley Bay Library, which is pretty local to me and local to where a lot of the Missing Hour takes place. So I'll be there on Saturday. I am appearing at Grangetown Library, which again is in the northeast, in Teesside in June, with my Northern Crime Syndicate buddies. So that'll be with Trevor Wood, Fiona Erskine, Rob Parker, Chris McGeorge, and Judith O'Reilly. And we do a thing called, I think you've been to one, haven't you?
I have been to one,
anywhere.
yeah.
We do a bit of an ad-lib 60 minutes where we'll claim to create a bestseller in 60 minutes or less with audience help. So if anyone's around Teesside, it's either the 22nd or 23rd of June. Have a little look as part of the Crossing the Tees Festival. And then actually just before that, I'll be down in London at Capital Crime on the 13th and 14th of June, which is an absolutely superb festival if you've never been. I know you've been before, but in case anyone who's watching hasn't been.
It really is.
So I'll be appearing there, and I'm quite excited actually, because doing a lot of events like this, I don't always get to appear with authors I've never met before, but there's a couple that I've not met who I'm going to be the moderator for their panel.
Nice.
And I've read all 3 books, and they're all fantastic. I'm going to be on with Tarek Ashkenani, who's written The Midnight King. I've done a few events with Tarek. But I'm also, the other 2 I've never met before, Anna Bailey, who I think her first book was Tall Bones. And I'm looking around to see if I've got where have I put it? I was going to flash the cover for her new one that I've just not long read. I've mislaid it. And then a guy called Chris Chibnall, who is bringing his debut crime book out, but he's the chap who wrote Broadchurch. So really looking forward to that.
Yeah, the things you can ask about that. Broadchurch is one of those that the first series I watched, every week when it was on. The second series, me and one of my friends at the time sat and just did one Saturday binge watching it. Absolutely loved Broadchurch. I bet it's still on somewhere.
Oh, it's bound to be somewhere. So really looking forward to that. And then I'll be at Harrogate Festival as well. I'm not appearing on any events. I'll be there lurking around socialising in July.
So people can find you in the beer tent and just wandering around in general? Generally,
there or thereabouts. There's a couple of events I'm really looking forward to going to, one of which is with Mick Herron, because I'm a huge fan of slow horses. And then another good friend of mine, Rob Parker, is making his first appearance as on a panel at Harrogate.
Fantastic.
And quick plug for him, that's his book, The Trouble.
Oh, good, I don't have to get mine out and knock the books over then.
So that was, I think, one of the Times books of the month in January, off the top of my head. So, fantastic book. So I'll be going to see him and support him as well.
Yeah, he did a launch where Mike Craven interviewed him at Blackwell's in Manchester. That was a brilliant, brilliant event. Nobody should let Mike be in charge of anything.
Well, of course, Mike had the book 1001 Emergency Questions.
He did.
As well, and if anyone's never seen that, it's literally 1001 of the most random questions if you get stuck for something to ask. And I've been and bought a copy since. I'm going to take it down. I am going to take it down and use it when I'm at Capital Crime, just to add a bit of humour in there, because there's some mad questions in there that you'd never think of in a million years.
Yeah, definitely be keeping people on the toes with that book.
Yes. I'm going to warn the panellists beforehand, just so I don't take them by surprise.
Might be, I don't know, might be better not to warn them.
Well, there are some questions in there that I would have to censor. I've seen Mike showed me a couple in particular, and I'll probably just ask the audience to pick random numbers between 1 and 1001, but there are some that I can't read out in polite company.
Or with children present, as Mike couldn't with Rob's kids there.
Well, that's it, yeah, because Rob had his kids as well, didn't he?
He did. Oh, my word. Right. Speaking of mums, let's go back to your mum's namesake, Maggie. Tell us about the opening chapter of The Missing Hour.
So the opening chapter, actually, there's an extra little story that goes with that as well, because it's not just the opening chapter to this book. Before I'd finished the book, and before I'd even submitted it to any agents, I entered the opening few chapters. I'd done about 20,000 words by this point, but I entered the first few chapters in a competition called the Lindisfarne Prize for Crime Fiction back in 2021. And I actually won that in 2021. First thing I've ever won for my writing. So that was a little bit weird that it became an award-winning book before it had ever been bought by a publisher and published. But I'm a big believer in I've got to grab you right from the start, right? Because there's so many different books you could read out there. And I'm not saying you'd put it down after one page if I didn't grab you, but I always try and really kind of set the tone and make it like a real kind of scruff of the neck kind of experience. And in this particular instance, it starts off in a dark hotel room, the door silently opening with a team of armed police officers sliding in to then rudely awaken Grant, Maggie's husband, and arrest him for murder. And it's very much a kind of, Maggie's in the eye of the storm afterwards, but she wakes up into this absolute, topsy-turvy world that makes no sense to her, and she just has to watch her husband being manhandled and dragged out of bed and out of the room, trying to compute these allegations they're thrown in as well. And I don't know if part of it might have even been because I knew I was going to chuck the first few chapters in for that competition. I thought, I've got to chuck as much as I can in there to kind of make it stand out. So whether that made a difference or not, because I knew I only had, I think it was 2,000 words that I was allowed to enter, even though I had the rest done. But as I was saying to you before, it's probably, I get asked a lot, what's the favourite book of the ones you've written? And this would be my favourite, and that's one of the reasons, because it's got that kind of sentimental attachment, not only to the family, but also to winning that prize as well. Although the winning of the prize did get a little bit out of hand. Have I told you that story before about the celebration?
No.
Oh God, so I knew I was on the shortlist, and I said they. So it's sponsored by LJ Ross, who's one of the biggest crime writers we've got up in the Northeast. And she'd said that she was going to announce the winner Sunday lunchtime, live on Facebook. So you saw this kind of 5-second countdown coming on the page. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. My name flashes up. Did a really horrendous victory dance in the kitchen, which I'll never repeat again.
I hope you will.
Depends how much I drink. But then my wife had obviously had a lot more faith in me than I did. So she'd already arranged babysitters and arranged some food from our favourite takeout. And she had some beer cooling in the back of the car. So she bundled me in the car, took me down to the seafront. And we were going to watch the sun go down and eat amazing takeout and drink beer. And we got there, and she suddenly just went, "Oh no, I've forgotten the bottle opener." So it was a bottle of Corona. I grabbed it. I said, "It's fine. Look, there's a brick wall over there. You just put the top against there, pop the top off, and it's all good." But I was talking to her as I did it, so I went like that, and I must have lifted the neck of the bottle up just a fraction. And when I hit it, the neck of the bottle hit the wall, and it sheared off. And the neck of the bottle went into my hand in that kind of webbed bit between the thumb and the finger. Now, I didn't realise at first, and she was laughing because she thought I'd just spilled my beer. I was laughing because the same reason. And then I looked down and I just saw this blood just pulsing out. So we had a load of napkins, packed it up with napkins, held it up, and I thought it had stopped. And so I kind of took the napkins off and I said, "Oh, look, it's fine, look." And I touched the hand, and just this blood shot out again.
Oh, my word.
So I said, "Look, I think we're probably going to have to go to A&E. I think I might need a couple of stitches." There was a couple in the car next to us had a plastic bag, because I didn't want to drip all over the seats. So I wrapped it in a plastic bag, held it out the window, and then, of course, that's flapping around at 70 miles an hour like that. If you remind me when I see you and you're not squeamish, I'll show you the photo of the plastic bag. So we get to hospital. And it was, absolutely heaving. They were taking ages to take me details. Meanwhile, there was just this pool of blood under my elbow, and it just wouldn't stop. So I think there was a norovirus outbreak at the time as well. So my wife couldn't come back in the room with me. And they took me off, strapped me up, elevated it, and then they came back through and they said, "Look, I'm really sorry. We're going to have to might as well send her home. You're probably going to be here for a while. We'll call her if anything, if you need picking up." And I managed to I get a message through to her to ask if she'd leave a box of takeout for me as well. And she had no appetite apparently, so she ended up leaving everything. So I had some amazing takeout, Kindle app on the one good hand on my phone, and I basically sat in takeaway and read books for about 2 hours, and they just couldn't stop the bleeding. It took about 5 hours, and they were worried that there was glass in there, and apparently there's an artery in that part of your hand. I had no idea, so I had to go in the next day I had to go in for surgery and get the artery stitched back up. So that was how I celebrated. The side of the car, it just had a streak of blood, probably about 6 feet along. And then I had that was the only photo I put on social media because I didn't want to put anything too gory on. And I just had this flood of messages going, "You bloody crime writers and your celebrations." And because I've got the best friends ever, within a week I had 5 bottle openers in the post. So I have not tried to open a bottle like that again since, quite frankly.
I'm glad to hear it.
So yeah, there was more action at Whitley Bay Lighthouse that night than there was in the opening chapter of the book, almost.
So let's go back to the opening chapter of the book. I don't know how much you got out before we went on to what happened with your hand.
So anyway, in terms of what happens, the police team basically break into the hotel room, drag Grant out of bed. And again, this is no spoilers because it's on the blurb on Amazon. But he ends up dying in police custody. He takes a massive blow to the head and ends up dying from a bleed on the brain. So Maggie doesn't know that obviously at the time, but she wakes up into this hellish nightmare of seeing her husband manhandled like that. And the opening chapter finishes with her being ordered to stay in bed by the police officer saying, we'll call you, we'll let you know when we're done with him. And then from there, it kind of moves on to, I guess, her immediate reaction after that, the shock of witnessing what she's just witnessed, and how do you process that, and where do you go from there?
And how do you process that, and where do you go from there when you think that is the worst thing that could ever happen to you? But that's in was within the first 5 pages of the book.
First
whole
2 or 3, yeah.
Yeah. So you just, from this thing that's the worst thing ever, you then, as we said, put her through the ringer. That there isn't a thing that doesn't happen to this poor woman.
But you know what? I think you can almost have more fun. And I say fun like I'm a really evil, kind of malevolent kind of god playing with people's characters' lives. But you can have more fun, I think, with someone who isn't a trained police officer.
Yeah.
Or isn't, involved in law enforcement in any particular way. Because by and large, they will have gone through, umpteen hours of training to know how to handle and approach and deal with certain situations. Maggie's a journalist. She's never been exposed to that side of life.
Yeah.
And I think you can make situations like that hopefully even more relatable for the reader, and they'll be asking themselves, Jesus, how would I react if that had happened? And also when it's someone who isn't trained to deal with those and doesn't know what to do, who to turn to, what to expect, I think you can justify them making some real questionable decisions after that as well, or acting in a way that might not make sense if you're a police officer. But actually she's acting out of instinct and gut, feel and emotion, and this loyalty towards her husband, rather than necessarily the facts that she's being presented with. So you can put people in some really horrendous situations, I guess, for want of a better phrase, if you take ordinary people really as your playthings, as your characters.
And how was that for you, writing something from the other side? Because as you said earlier, you've written police procedurals before, but this flip side, completely different. So obviously, like you say, it's different the way that she would go about it, because she wouldn't necessarily have the same logic as the police. Mm-hmm. But for you writing it, that's quite a flip side.
Yeah, there's a couple of bits I think kind of add to the enjoyment. One of which is, so my first 4 books as Robert Scragg were all part of the series. And I think it's fairly safe to say if you've got a detective-based series, in the vast majority of cases, that detective is going to make it out of that book alive, unless it's the end of a series. So there's only so much jeopardy you can really put them in. I know you can do it to people around them, but there's a certain degree of, this guy's going to come out or this lady's going to come out of it safe, if slightly damaged at the end. With a standalone thriller like this, there's no guarantees who survives. Anyone's up for grabs. I'm not quite as lethal as the likes of George R.R. Martin in terms of how many characters I kill off, but I like the notion that actually I can pull the rug from under your feet because no one has to survive because there's not a sequel. There's no sequel for people to be there for, so anyone is fair game. And then the other thing I really enjoyed with this book, and also it was the same with 7 Days as well, is I wrote both of those in the first person. So all the detective books were third person, and it's a different challenge as a writer, but a different kind of window in the characters I can give you as a reader because you're in their heads.
Yeah.
If it's third person, there's only a certain amount of information that those characters know, and I can only tell you what they can see and hear and smell, or whatever senses they're using. Whereas in The Missing Hour, you are inside Maggie's head. You hear every thought she's got. You hear it kind of real time, her stream of consciousness. And I think that really helps get that emotional side over a bit more, because you can share in that panic that she's experiencing. You can share in all of those emotions she's going through. And that was something that we worked through in the edits, actually, because it started out as all in the third person. And I got my editor, I think, to thank for the suggestion around that we'd get more emotional bang for buck, if you like, if it was in the first person. Then she was absolutely right. There was a moment when she suggested that, and I thought, oh God, I can't be bothered to do all that. It's going to take ages. Will it really make it that much better? And after about a week, I thought, oh God, she's right. I'm going to have to do it. And it took a while, but I think it was worth it.
I think it was worth it. I'm trying to think, like, third person. I mean, I know it's not going to have changed the story massively, but that is a massive amount of work.
Well, it is, because you can't just do a find and replace.
No.
Either, because obviously it started off as she goes here, or her sister, her mum, and if you just do a find and replace for her or she, those letters appear in other words as well, in that order. So you get all kinds of weird and wonderful things. So I must have gone through the whole thing 3 times, line by line by line, painstakingly, changing each and every one. And even then, when I listened to the audiobook, I found 2 that I've missed. So I'm gonna drop a line over to Hodder and just say, can we just get these changed for the paperback, please? So it just goes to show, no matter how many times you read through something, you can still miss little details.
Especially when you've changed it from one view to another, and then you've read it so many times during all of those changes. And I think sometimes your brain probably thinks it's reading what you've already put there rather than what's in front of you.
Maybe,
quite a different thing to go back over.
Yeah. And it's happened twice before, actually, but in a slightly more amusing kind of context. So I say amusing, it's amusing for me. But first ever Robert Scragg book, the thing I got emailed about most from readers wasn't about the story, wasn't about the plot. It was all about where the detective goes into a mini Tesco on his way home to get some milk, and he drives. So he drives there, walks home, and I just forgot that he'd had his car. And I got so many emails saying, what did he do with his car? Did he leave it there? Because do you know what? A lot of those mini supermarkets have got a 2-hour maximum. Did he get a ticket? And going off on a massive tangent like that. And then also I got a cover quote from another author called Howard Linsky. And the name, they spelt his name wrong on the cover and called him Howard Linksy. And by the time he spotted it and I spotted it, they'd already done the full print run. So, but Howard did get a few nice bottles of wine from my publisher at the time as an apology. And he thought it was funny anyway, so it's all good. But it just goes to show, no matter how many times you read through, there can still be bits you miss.
Yeah, and the amount of times I've spelled my own name wrong and then don't pick it up the first time I read it. Yeah. Your brain just sees what it wants to see. Laura's asked, if you could meet one of your characters for a pub drink or meal, who would it be and why, and what would you want to ask them?
Oh. That's a really good question. Do you know what? There's probably a couple actually, but I'm gonna go all sentimental on you
Mm.
and say it would have to be Davy from The Missing Hour, because as I mentioned before, it's my uncle David that character's based on, and unfortunately we lost him. He sadly passed away about 3 weeks ago. So I would go for another drink with him, and he didn't get a chance to read the book. So I would go for a drink with him, and I would force him to read it over a pint, and then I'd want to know what he thought, if he thought I'd done him justice. I think that's what I would go for.
I like that answer. I like that answer a lot. One of the things I wanted to touch on was settings, because the really, really clever thing with the settings that you've used, you mentioned places like Clifton Suspension Bridge. There's different areas in Manchester with different shops, and the cathedral, and all of these little things. I think it's really clever to have had something that, even if somebody's not been to Bristol, they'll have heard of or know what the suspension bridge looks like. But if not, they can picture a bridge, And then we've got a pub. You can picture a pub even if you don't know about the Corn Exchange or anything in Manchester. I wondered why you picked those settings, but I really, I really like the fact that even if we don't know them in person, they're all easily imaginable settings. That's what I was trying to say.
Yeah. So I suppose taking the ones you've mentioned there, the Clifton Suspension Bridge was just purely by chance because of where I'd situated the original murder, or the original that was the murder that Grant's accused of. And I had to figure out from there what would be the nearest police station it would take Grant to. So I'd gone through it on Google Street View, on Google Maps, found the nearest the nearest police station on the map, and I'd looked at the route they would take, and that just happened to take them past the Clifton Suspension Bridge. But for a lot of the other stuff, it's places I've been. I spent a chunk of time in Manchester a few years back while I was studying for something at work, at the day job, and there were just a few locations kind of stood out there that I've revisited. And anything in the northeast, it tends to be somewhere I'm familiar with. I live near a lot of the locations. I've used cafes where I've been in that cafe having a cup of coffee, writing the scene set in that cafe. Like 7 Days finishes in a cafe called 9 Streets, which is about 600 yards from my house. And I don't know, it's quite satisfying doing that. I like kind of grounding it in reality. And actually that's come through in a lot of feedback and comments I've had from readers and reviews as well, saying the Northeast ones in particular, they love to be able to see places in the books that they know and they've been themselves, like the same beach and the same kind of stretch of coastline and all that kind of stuff. Landmarks like the Spanish City and St Mary's Lighthouse are pretty iconic. And it really seems to resonate with local readers in particular. And I think they are kind of significant enough that even if you're not from the region, and if you have a little look and look them up, you can see the kind of their real kind of standout kind of locations.
One of the things I wanted to ask you is how you keep up with everything. You always seem to be on the go. You never seem to be in one place for long. You go off and do events, and you go and support other authors as well as doing your own events. And then you've got, your wife, young family. So all of that obviously, has to fit with work and writing. So give us some tips for balancing it and looking so kind of cool, calm and collected while you do.
I think a big part of it for me, certainly in terms of getting my words done and getting the books out, it was a bit of a mindset shift really when I got my first contract, because up until that point I'd just been writing under my own deadlines, my own head of steam. And when I got the first contract, that first book was done, but I had a deadline straight away for book 2. And I didn't have the luxury of the 7 years it took me to write book 1. That kind of, there was lots of different iterations, and I paused it and I went away from it and I came back. But when you've got a contractual deadline, so that kind of flicked a bit of a switch for me, to the point where from that point on, when I'm writing a book, I have 1,000 word a day minimum. And on a really good day, that might take an hour. On a really bad day, it might take 3 or 4 hours. but I won't stop until I've done that, even if it's pretty late at night. You mentioned I've got young family. My kids are 7 and 6, the youngest two. I've got a 25-year-old as well, but she can take care of herself now. So it's after the kids are in bed, and by the time I sit down, if my wife's gone to bed or she's watching TV or whatever, I know the faster I get that done, the sooner I can relax. So it's I guess mainly about I'm more disciplined than I ever used to be, but also because I know that how precious the time is I've got, I'll take a chance writing anywhere I get. Like even I went for a dentist appointment on Tuesday, and because I know where I'm up to in the particular chapter, I got 150 words done in the dentist waiting room.
Thought you were going to say the chair then.
No, not quite. Got the dentist drilling away, kind of wiping the screen of my phone. And even things like when I drove over to Manchester for Rob Parker's launch, I tried for the first time ever a little technique that he's used for a while now, which is just dictating into your phone, which I never thought would work, actually. But I stand corrected. It's not perfect. I've obviously had to go back and edit, but I got 1,000 words done on the way to Manchester and another 1,000 words done on the way back. And those 1,000 words probably took me about 40 minutes to speak each, which is a lot faster than writing them even. And that's time that otherwise I would have just been listening to the radio or a podcast or a book or whatever. So it's taken every chance I get to get something down. And then there's bits of it are a bit of a juggle. So I've promised my wife, for example, I'll avoid where I can doing events that are back-to-back weekends, because obviously we've got lots of stuff on with the kids. Yeah. And she's been mega supportive as well. Obviously stepping in and doing the solo parenting thing when I nick off down for a festival here, there and everywhere. But it's a constant kind of juggling act, really, but it's treating it like a full-time job, which for me it isn't at the moment. I know for the majority of authors it isn't. Yeah. The last stats I saw suggested about 10% make a living from nothing but writing. Wow. So I've got my 9-to-5 job as well. And I think having that kind of really focuses the attention, because I know I haven't got time to mess around on an evening. If it's a writing evening, it's got to be done. Because if I miss a deadline, and I've never missed one yet, but if I miss a deadline, it's kind of point of pride, really. I don't like failing any deadlines or anything like that. So I think it was as much as anything getting in that mindset of this is a job as well. It's a job I love. It's a job I enjoy. It's not my full-time job, but if I want it to be my full-time job, I've got to treat it like a full-time job.
And then hopefully, you'll be at that point before too long, and then surely that reduces a lot of pressure in one way, because you can be writing wherever you are. You can write from home during your normal working hours, but also you would lose a lot of the time out with people and chatting and all of the things that keep your mind going. So there'd be a balance there, I'd imagine, as well.
To an extent, I don't think it would bother me that much, because even before the pandemic, in my day job, I'd worked from home. I'd been a home worker for about 10 years. And I still popped in the office sometimes, but I'd been a home worker for most of that, so I'm kind of used to that. And you still have interactions with people over Teams. I do pretty much everything over Teams these days. So it's a problem I'd like to have, put it that way, in terms of making sure I still get enough social interaction. I'm sure I'd manage. But you're right, I could, at the moment I do a book a year. I'd love to be able to do more than a book a year. If I didn't have the day job, I could absolutely do at least 2, if not 3, I think. And I'm also having a bit of a dabble in screenwriting at the moment. Just not anything kind of that's been purchased or kind of commissioned or anything, just for my own entertainment, really. But I'd love to have a proper crack at screenwriting as well.
And based on reading The Missing Hour, I would love to watch whatever you come up with. I did say earlier that this has been, I didn't say it on camera though, did I? Well, live. I know we're only in May, but this has been my book of the year so far. And I do not normally say this so early on, even when I know, because sometimes I've known from January, but there's something, you learn something, don't you, when you read so many books, because you must read a lot as well. You learn straight away which ones really hit the mark for you. Mm-hmm. So what kind of things have you been reading recently?
I suppose probably some of my favourite books this year. I mean, you've seen one of them there, The Trouble Deep by Rob Parker, which is an absolutely fantastic read, the first in a new series. Um, Probably my other couple of favourites, The Chemist by A. Dand, which is just out this month. That is another absolute corker.
I'm
What's the name of the
taking
one I'm reading at the
notes.
moment? So the one I'm reading at the moment is different to what I normally would read, actually. It's not crime as such. It's by an author called V.E. Schwab. Have you heard of her?
I have not.
And it's called Bury Our Bones in the Midnight Soil, or Bury My Bones in the Midnight Soil. And that is fantastic. That's the one that I'm struggling to put down at the moment.
Right, I've just made a note of that.
And that's, like I said, that's not crime. That's something quite different. It's pretty dark at times, but yeah, have a little look, see if the blurb floats your boat.
Absolutely.
But yeah, those are probably my picks of the year so far, I think.
Yeah, I mean, we're really lucky because most of what I read is crime fiction, but because I get my reading list kind of set by which authors I'm interviewing, there's so many kind of different variations, aren't there, of anything under the crime fiction umbrella. We're really lucky, but doesn't mean we don't read outside of the genre as well when we, don't often get a chance to, but yeah, quite happy to go and look around.
I do try and kind of keep it fresh and read a few non-crime books every now and again, but crime's still most of what I read. And you're right, it's one of the absolute perk of the job is getting sent a lot of books to read, to blurb them before they even come out, and getting to read them kind of in advance. Like both The Chemist and The Trouble Deep, I got copies of those way in advance of publication, so it's an absolute honour to get a chance to read those early. And you can't see it just in the camera shot. Obviously, I've got the bookshelves behind, but there are piles of books everywhere. Yeah. I almost wonder if I start needing to get the floor and the ceilings reinforced.
Earlier on, you mentioned the Lindisfarne Prize, and I want to get this one in before we finish because we're getting towards time now. You've also there's been other short story nominations, CWA.
Yeah, so myself and a group of other authors. It was the first one, I think, was during COVID.
That's when I bought it. That's why I knew which book it was.
And we all kind of got together. It was we were kind of corralled by a friend of mine, Victoria Selman, who's another crime author. And we all chipped in short stories to go to a charity anthology, which we called Afraid of the Light. And I get the years right. I think it was 2021 and 2022. We did anthologies, and both the stories I had in those got shortlisted for the CWA Daggers. And then the one I did last year got longlisted for the CWA Daggers. So I'm kind of three times the bridesmaid, but never the bride type of thing. Fourth time lucky, you never know.
Absolutely. We are coming up to the last minute, so do you want to give do you want to give us a kind of a recap of The Missing Hour, what you can say about it? I can't wait to have people that I can discuss this with without spoiling things. So
yeah, and it's like we were saying before, it's a book that's hard to talk too much about without starting to give stuff away.
Yeah.
It took me ages to even decide. I've been at a few events where I've done a reading, and it took me ages to decide which part to read that wouldn't give away massive chunks of it, really. So it's, there's a few kind of themes at the heart of it. One is the kind of this overall concept of guilt and trust within your family. But for me, the last couple of books, even though they're about some pretty dark crimes, the family's been at the heart of that, and what family means to the main characters and how that has shaped them and how it affects them. But I guess to recap, what I haven't got for The Missing Hour actually, and I do for next year's book, is that kind of killer one-line pitch, the kind of the one-liner. So I'm going to have to go back to the drawing board actually and think of one. But so for Missing Hour, I'll say story of Maggie, who she is the lone crusader, trying to prove her husband's innocence when the entire world, the entire country, I guess, thinks he is capable of the worst possible act. But in true crime fiction fashion, she's got secrets of her own as well, and it's all about how she has to try and unpick her husband's secrets while, I guess, while guarding some of her own from people who would much rather his untimely death was just left to rest.
And that literally is all you can say about the book without spoiling anything.
Kind of, yeah. I need to, like I say, when I'm writing the next one, I've got that kind of 1 or 2 line pitch, but I need to go back to the drawing board with Missing Hour. It's funny, with next year's book, I started from the 1 line pitch and kind of built the book out from that. So I'm trying to think kind of a little bit more commercially around how I can kind of pitch it to random strangers on the street type of thing.
Well, I will recommend it to anyone who wants to read a thriller that will come out leaving them feeling like they've been on a wild ride and everything. You can't say anything. Wild ride sounds so kind of generic, doesn't it? But
well, I think we worked out it all takes place over the space of, I think it's 5 days, so it's quite a condensed kind of time frame. Even more so than 7 days, which obviously happens in 7. But yeah, and that was one of the things I was going for, was that real kind of tight, claustrophobic almost time frame that things happening, because that kind of really compels both the events and the characters through at a rate of knots.
Well, you do manage to keep the pressure up, and that narrative thrust that we seek in first person is keeping everything moving all the way through. Thank you so much for coming to. Absolutely loved it. Thank you so much for coming to talk about The Missing Hour. Thank you to everyone who's joined. So I'm just laughing. I've got a screen open at the side of me so I can see questions. And Laura Hamilton says, thanks for a great hour. And then hashtag sorry not sorry TBR. So that's it. Laura will love this book. So, and Leslie Lloyd, if you are watching, this one is definitely one for you as well. But I can't go through the whole list and tell everyone. Just go and read it. So I hope you come back for the next book. What's it called? Do you have a name yet?
So the next one is, at the moment, because titles change, the next one is called We the Jury.
Ooh. And on that note, I'll await a booking in date for around publication day. Thank you so much, and congratulations.
Thanks for having me along.
Absolute cracker of a book.
Cheers, Sam. Thanks, everyone.